Mm-hmm. Hello all, and welcome to the continuing series we call Conversations That Matter in our website, thewisdomfactory.net. I'm Mark Davenport, and here as usual with my mate and motivator, Heidi. Yes. And she's going to let you know how to participate here and get the most out of your experience today.
Yeah, today we are streaming on many places, but here on the wisdomfactory.net/live streaming, there you can leave your comments. We are also streaming on YouTube Live. We are streaming on Google Plus event page, and where else? Here on Webinar Jam.
Mm-hmm.
4 places. Anyway, when you want to leave your comments or in Webinar Jam, you can register if you want, and or on the Google on the website, thewisdomfactory.net, and on live streaming, and then you will be guided to the page Men, Women, and Power.
Okay, technical question. I don't see us up on the screen. Are we in a big or a little?
Let me do that. I'm the tech guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little.
So.
Okay, now to our distinguished guests, both of whom we're very honored to have with us today, talking about how men and women wield power differently. And to present them in the traditional way, we ask ladies first. Dr.B.v.Meibom from Germany. Say hello, Barbara.
Hello to everybody. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay, great. And then to the male member here, Jon Freeman, say hi.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here.
Okay. Now, I can't see what I wrote because the screen is over.
You can speak, can't you?
Just without reading.
Without reading. Oh, gosh.
Well, anyway, this episode that we're doing today had its origins in an earlier show with Barbara back in April, where she talked about how women handle and express power. And afterwards, we had the suggestion that we should have this discussion with men too, together. And so I didn't want to handle these two powerful ladies all by myself. So I asked Jon, and he was foolish enough to accept. So
very brave.
Right, very brave, yes. So we shall see. So we could start the fun by asking each to introduce themselves briefly, but not saying who should go first. How's that work?
I think this time it's Jon. Last time it was
okay. All right, I'll go for it. So, what do I say about myself? I'm a bit of a generalist in an age where specialists seem to get more approval. I write about all sorts of things, including alternative ways of looking at science and consciousness. I make my living particularly in relation to organizations and organizational development, and I do that based a lot on being something of a spiral dynamics geek. So it will undoubtedly come through in this conversation that somewhere I will talk about stages of development and so on. But yeah, that's me.
All right, thank you, Jon. And now, Barbara.
Okay, I normally say I walk on 2 feet. I have a scientific background in political science and communication, and I have a background in human psychology and therapy. And I try to connect these 2 dimensions or these 2 axes to the world. I'm leading an institute for the art of leadership. And to me, it's very important to come to a type of relationship between people, which is both self-empowered and attentive and mindful with regard to the other. And so, of course, it's referring as well to the topic of the relationship between men and women, but as well to the topic of the relationship to the power of myself and the use of power of others.
Yeah.
So that's my
All right.
background.
That's good. And now we can ask questions.
We could ask questions.
Yeah.
When we talked together with Barbara, we have talked a lot about our upbringing and how women were sort of cut off of their own power. So I would like to hear a little bit the perspective of Jon and you, how you experienced power as a boy. And then I want to say to the listeners, please go back to the wisdomfactory.net and look for the episode with Barbara from Meibom, and then you can see all the videos we have done.
Okay, so you want me to talk about experiencing power as a boy and as a man, which I would certainly start from the place where personally I would not say that I had much of an experience of power. Possibly I have done in the last decade a little bit more, but it's seemed to me that there's been a kind of an interesting crossover because of the amount of attention from feminism, that the view of men and what men are and what men should be has become quite fuzzy, I think. And that, you know, you're probably aware there's quite a lot of statistics about how much higher the suicide rate these days is in young males than it is in females, because I think what used to there at least used to be some clarity about what a man's role was in the world, and that has become less so. I was thinking about this whole topic, and a lot of it seems to me that a lot of what we talk about now is taking a slice through our perspective on women's roles that is particularly true of the last 20 or 30 years, and that we tend to look at it from a very much a psychological perspective. And I was very conscious of the fact that, you know, if you go back 100 years, 1 in 5 of men from the United Kingdom died in the First World War. And there's something about the position of men that is also, they're disempowered in a different way. And the way they're expected to express their power is to go out and fight for the family, or was that, and to go down, you know, to go down mines where also lots of men kind of died in really difficult occupations. And so we've had this transition from the way things used to be into the way things are now becoming, which quite rightly involves a new perspective of the position of women in society and in the world, but which has also been quite kind of undermining to whatever the male role is, and to how masculinity is now meant to be expressed.
Yeah.
May I answer?
And I'd like to.
Please.
Okay.
Directly. I'm very grateful to you that you mention the way how the men were brought up in order to fight for something. And I just refer to my latest experiences in constellation work, and it came very evidently to me that after a period where we took a lot of attention to address the female issues, it's high time to address the male issues. Because to me, it was very evident that there is a tremendous abuse of men, which is so far remaining in the unconsciousness. And this abuse in warrior times was to fight for somebody, and in peace times, it's to fight in the business world, which is an abuse too. And the drama to me is that the women tend to adapt to the male perspective, which is one issue. But the other issue is really that men have to discover the degree of abuse which they are subject to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would agree with, may I? Because I look back at the history of my own relationship with power, and I just bought the games that were being played. And I felt powerless when I was low on the totem pole, as they say. And I felt very, very vigorous and potent when I found myself higher on the pole. But I never really questioned the pole for a long time. And so I was really hoping that women would, when I became aware of these issues in the 60s and 70s, I was really hoping that women would change the work world, so that these would no longer be issues and I wouldn't have to deal with them, Well, that's not quite the way it worked out, but that's just how I entered into the conversation. Power. Now that I'm not working, it's completely different. It's a whole different game. I look at the world very differently, but it's very real for many, many men, and it's really nasty. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I think that kind of it was quite present in your previous conversation, Barbara, was the difference between power and empowerment, or power to and power over, or however we express that. And even in the notion of men being trained to fight or expected to fight, there is also an aspect of that which was about the expectation that it's the man's role to protect as well, and that's quite that was actually quite important internally. That was one of the things that would be seen as a validation, if you go back 100 or 200 years, a validation of my position as a man, or to be, now we don't have the concept of the breadwinner, because all sorts of things which are not just changes in mindset, they're also technical changes, like the availability of a contraceptive pill and the invention of washing machines, that have altered the way that the possibilities are present for women to have a different role that wouldn't even have existed back then. And so there's a certain kind of definition which is not just about our shift in mindset. So one of the things that spiral dynamics talks about is our response, our mindset responses are also responses to shifts in life conditions, and the life conditions have been changing.
This is true, but I think it's very important to refer to the virtue aspect of male fighting. The protection aspect. And I think despite any technological advance and despite the pill or the washing machine, there is a need to protect life. This is an ongoing task, which is a task for humanity, and it's a task for men and women with different focuses. What I perceive is that this task of protection has been misused, and not only right now, but for centuries. It has been misused by men, mostly men in power, for their interests. And we are now in a period where this sort of misuse is somehow entzaubert. What is the word? The magic is taken off. The magic is taken off. And we can regard what is done with people, men and women. And to me, I have the feeling men have to come to an idea of the misuse they are undergoing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not not disagreeing with any of those perspectives or validating the way that men have been. I think I'm just pointing to the fact that we are as much in transition, and effectively we're being called upon, all of us, men, women equally, to have an integration that has not yet happened. I mean, we're all, part of the reason I started from the perspective that I did is that we are all caught up in what spiral dynamics or Integral would call the orange mindset. It's all very technological, it's all very material oriented, it's all very exploitative of the environment and so on. And that inhabits the planet to a huge degree. And the response that we have psychologically that comes out of the next mindset, the green mindset of looking at what do we think, how do we relate, and so on, it's arising both in reaction to that way of being thing oriented and technologically oriented and mind oriented. One of the things that we don't talk enough about, in my perspective, is going back to the roots of our existence, which include what spiral dynamics would talk of as beige and purple, and our relationship with the earth and our connection with nature, which is equally available to men and women. I mean, it appears currently like it's something that only largely women are interested in. I mean, one of my experiences over the past 40 years is of going to workshops in all sorts of areas of self-development or new age and so on, and being, one man in a room of 10 women, or one of 2 men in a room of 20 women, that's part of the shift even of the consciousness movement seems to be largely orientated at the moment through women and their engagement with those areas, which men have self-excluded from or felt excluded from, or I don't know what, but Mark, you and I are still, I think, in a minority.
Well, I would, if I refer to the spiral dynamics, I think it's important that you mention purple, because purple is sort of a connectedness on a very intimate local basis. And I think the fact that the right-wing movements are so strongly coming forward nowadays is, amongst others, because the purple and the green is more advanced and more conscious, but the purple is not sufficiently acknowledged. So this is, I think, very important to recognize. If you want to have an integral perspective, then you have to honor the purple and the green, of course. And both, if I'm not mistaken, are more on the female or feminine side than, for instance, the orange. So that means if women are more inclined to take care of the earth, of giving birth and dying, all this is related much more to the feminine consciousness and to the female living. And so far, I think it's not. It's for good reason that women are sort of a sword, ein Schwert, a sword, for correcting the project of civilization.
I would like to jump in here a little bit. And for me, women still, most of them, think that the genuine female feminine impulse is sort of inferior to the masculine, and that's why they go into the masculine jobs and ideas and, trying to make careers and everybody. I saw an article lately which written by a woman, the best way to have really 50% of women, I don't know, on Google or wherever. But I answered, maybe not everybody wants to do that, everybody who is woman. So how can we as women acknowledge and recognize first ourselves, the power which we have as women in caring for the planet or whatever, and how then men or the orange world, as you say, John, could be led to recognize that too, instead of saying, that's a woman, Thanks.
But that's why, again, I would want to emphasize the fact that the blue and orange world was in many ways built around an intellectual concept and a way of seeing the world, which has put science in a box. It's put the whole of material existence in a box. I mean, we can have a conversation here in which Barbara can talk about constellations. Constellations they're not possible. They do not exist in the blue or orange world. So we're looking at the world in a way which is breaking a mold, which actually has a very tight hold on most of humanity. And I kind of have mixed feelings in regard to what Barbara has said about purple, because it does seem to be that women are the ones who are going back and doing the job of reawakening purple. But of course, originally that would not have been the case. I mean, if you go back to the Aboriginal, the indigenous societies, both men and women would have had that sense of connection with nature, and of course in a lot of those societies it would be men who were shamans, not exclusively so, but there's something that I want to really hold as central to this difficulty and to what the question you're asking, Heidi, is that the accent, the emphasis on mentality and on a particular kind of logic and a particular way of seeing the world, it actually excludes a perceptual mode which I think tends to be more natural to women than it is to men, or it feeds certain aspects of the difference between masculinity and femininity in the way that our brains and our perceptual systems work.
I think this is true, and it is true what Heidi said, that in a patriarchal society, of course, women who want to empower themselves cut off themselves exactly from this capacity of intuition and broader perception, and this is a shame. It's a shame, and it's really cutting off possibilities of development. I think that's what I tried to address in the last talk, which was addressing the women. Now, the question is, what is, if we talk together as men and women, how can we come to a co-creative and cooperative and partnership relationship? I think it needs efforts on both sides. And I wonder, what is the effort on the male side?
For me, the effort on the male side would actually be the acknowledgement of a change in the whole of the scientific model. I mean, that's one of the things that I've written about, which is the need to actually demolish the orange materialistic scientific model, and both men and women are trapped by that, and so men equally need to engage with the fact that that is a broken system, a broken point of view, because when both genders engage with that shift, then we will empower both of us to operate in a more connected and a more intuitive and a more relationship oriented way. That to me is the integration. That is what happens when we find our way to step above the kind of orange-green split that we're sitting in the middle of, and that a lot of this conversation tends to get a little trapped in. We've got to get above that, and we've got to be able to include and transcend into a place that has both.
Me too, but go ahead.
All right. Well, this is something I was hinting at when I was talking about my perceptions in the 60s and 70s when I first became aware of some of these issues. That, the world of work that I knew, the orange world, that is, that I was thrown into, whether I wanted to be there or not, left so much of me out of the equation. It was so unsatisfying. It just did not, it wasn't enough. And I was looking to women, and somehow they had some secrets here that I needed in order to fill up those spaces that the orange world did not leave me. And so I'm agreeing with you quite fully there, John. Indeed.
And I wanted to add something about green in the feminine way of doing, or the female, let's say, and taking care. And we also need to talk about healthy and unhealthy ways. I read today in a newspaper in Italy here that certain people in a certain place have suggested that children up to 14 years should be accompanied to school by parents or grandparents and taken home so that they don't have any freedom. So the tendency that devouring mother to protect everything and then crash the others under this strange way of understanding taking care. So I want just to take it put it into the room. And as we know by Jordan Peterson and other people who fight against this situation in American universities, where the universities are supposed to be a safe space for people instead of preparing them to life. Okay, that's my take on it.
Well, I think the overwhelming mother, that's an archetype. Which
Sure.
is pretty dangerous, and we should avoid it. But what I would like to put into our conversation as a topic is there's one realm where the women have to somehow come to grips with themselves. They somehow have to find an agenda how to get out of the trap in which we have moved in. My question to John is, what is the pathway for the man? I remember that a couple of days ago, a very brilliant integral thinker who is very much for me a representative of the new man, he said, we have to put this alienation of the orange, we have to put it into our conversations among men. We have to discuss this among men instead of waiting for the women to help us to get to that. So that's my question to John. Isn't it time that men break this conceptualization they are kept in themselves?
I'm not going to disagree with that. I wish I knew how to make that happen faster. There's something, and I'm kind of sensing into why isn't that happening? Why hasn't that happening? I mean, what happened? Why can I write a book which goes right into the center of this conversation that is totally ignored? nobody is asking the questions. And so when the idea of challenging this alienating orange, as you refer to it, when that comes up, there doesn't seem to be a space generally in the culture for men to go there. And I don't know what would create, I mean, I spend a lot of time blogging and writing and talking to people in the hope that that space will get created. And I feel like actually I'm missing something too, because it isn't happening.
I would like to say something to that. Today in the car, we thought about, there was this tiny little car in front of us and a girl inside, and I said, this is a girly car. And we were talking about that men still want to buy big cars. They want to be, isn't that maybe something, a heritage from really a biological trait, that men have this to be assertive like this,
occupy space,
yeah, and so they are fine in orange, you know. They don't even notice what they miss. They notice only, like you said, you notice many things only after I brought you there.
I'm not sure that that's as true as it looks. I mean, on a surface level, it can look like that, because the conscious attention isn't being paid to what's being felt. The underlying truth is that men are showing all the evidences of being extremely stressed by that situation.
Yes, absolutely true.
And
absolutely
somehow that isn't turning into, we have to do something different here. It's a kind of entrapment, or it looks like that to me. I don't know whether men do need to occupy space. I mean, that's also part of, is that part of what we're trained to do? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a little bit in this direction. I wanted also to say that men were trained not to feel themselves and not to realize what is going on in themselves. So you say they are highly stressed, and I do think it's true, but they don't notice it, and they don't want to, you know, even if they are almost breaking down, but they continue because they don't realize it. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I think one answer might be that it would be really traumatizing to come to the point to realize how you deal with yourself. And this is true for a man or for a woman who is disconnected from her feelings and from her intuition as well. It's very painful to go to that point in yourself. And well, this might explain it.
Yeah, there's a lot in the kind of big boys don't cry. I mean, it's like it is very, it's quite a deep training for most men. So and whereas, you know, women are, it's not only that women are sort of allowed to cry, it's that the whole of the cultural upbringing is, well, women are going to have to relate because they've got to relate to the children. I mean, okay, that mindset has been shifting a bit, and the notion of men who have actual feeling relationships with their children is one of the places where I think this has changed. Outside the home, it hasn't. Outside in the working world, it hasn't. So this is a slow cultural process, I think, that we're witnessing, and the trouble with it is it needs to be happening faster if we're going to have a sustainable and healthy way of running the planet.
Yeah, but is perhaps the kind of, in Western civilization, this kind of shift to the right, is that a reaction against the demands, the threat of the chaos of a system breaking down, and people having to look at themselves in ways that they didn't have to in past generations.
Well, I think we all try to figure an agenda to a different society which is less harmful and less damaging. So that's why we are talking about it. But the future somehow touches grief and touches feelings of failure. And maybe we just should invite the courage to feel failure and to know that we have followed a pathway which is not leading to life. And this, of course, as a man, needs courage, much more than from a woman. To acknowledge that the agenda is sort of leading to an impasse is, of course, not something which gives you the feeling of strength.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. There's so much in what you've just said and in what Mark said before that about the kind of polarization that happens in our current situation, where fear and stress, they either push people, or people respond by going down and into the older systems and responding more deeply from the fear and putting up barriers and walls and you know, going for Brexit and electing Trump and all of that. And the alternative would be for us to find ways of moving up spiral and becoming more integral, and of actually moving out of the fear into something which is much more of a sense of, we do have the power if we choose to do something different. And that, to me, is also part of this sense of entrapment. We're still in the middle of that, and it sometimes feels as if it's only when things break down that we'll let go of the attempt to do things the old way, because it will become very visible that the old ways aren't working to more people in the way it's visible to us right now. But then what's going to take people from that place of fear and grief and uncertainty and panic and whatever it is, what's going to enable more of us, more of the world, to move into a higher perspective viewpoint?
Well, to move up this spiral, to me, is sort of dependent on the capacity to open the heart and to appreciate the other. So if this is true, it would mean that what is really needed between men and women is that they appreciate each other.
Absolutely.
And this is difficult for men beyond the sexual and the erotic sphere, or the family mother sphere, and it's difficult for women too. I remember a situation where I said something like this, and a woman stood up and said, "This is definitely something I will not give to the man, appreciation." And of course, if we go on like that, it can't work. We need to listen to each other and to the wisdom and the knowledge of each other and to appreciate. I think that could be eventually an agenda to move upwards, the spiral.
Yeah.
Here a moment, I have discovered that there are some comments. They are coming back to what we said before. It's Vivek, who actually lives in London, but he is from India. And he says, we need feminine and masculine to be in balance, but the present economy forces every woman to give up femininity. Even women, yeah. To give up femininity and become masculine, which is a tragedy in his view.
Sure.
And then the other thing that we addressed before already. So
he is absolutely right. But on the other hand, there are many women who quit the business and start independent work because they want to work in a different way. And I remember that, like me.
Like you.
And I remember that even a very high percentage of new created jobs go back to this attempt of women to have a workspace which is more appreciative, more humane, more flexible to time needs of family, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Counterforce at work there, where young professional women in their 30s or so start to really feel that the professional world is not satisfying for them, and that they're missing out on a big chunk of their own femininity. And so, for example, in their 20s, female lawyers outnumber male lawyers. By the time they reach 40, it's the other way around. They don't stay there. It's not their world. They don't feel comfortable. It's not really necessarily that they're forced out. It's just they don't want to be there.
And what you are saying is what Jordan Peterson says about his experience as a clinical practitioner, a psychotherapist, and he has this experience. He's working a lot with these high-performance women, and they say at a certain time when they are 30-something, they say, do I really want that, or do I want a family? And I think, yes, why not? Why is having a family and having children minor to being a successful money-earning lawyer?
Yeah.
All of that. I mean, a lot of my my work colleagues are women who fit what you're describing, and one of the things that I think inhabits this space is the extent to which, because it is still the case in a lot of relationships and in a lot of families, that women, particularly when they're having families, they're kind of given a role, or there is a natural role which allows them to be in the space where they are still responsible for the family, and they're also going to manage their career alongside, and they may, they have a child and then they come back one day a week or whatever. One of the and there's nothing wrong with that, but one of the side effects of that is that the mindset is still, both for the collective and in men's minds, oh, in order for all that to work, I still have to be the breadwinner. Yeah. So that history still carries on as something which makes it more difficult for men to break out of the mold than for women.
Yeah, I think the so-called Generation Ypsilon, it's sort of a first access to change this mode, because there are more. It seems that there are more and more men who claim that they would like to have more time for their families than the normal professionals so far, which I think is only successful if they really have the longing, if they really have the wish to change their time schedules and their time frames, because all this is organized around time. You need certain patterns of time if you want to bring up your children in a good way. And as long as this is only a task for the women, then it's difficult. But as soon as men realize that they are really, really missing something very important in their life, to realize how precious the upbringing of life is, they won't feel the longing and they won't go for it. So again, it's a hard issue, I think.
But maybe they feel the longing but they fear to be overrun in the career ladder, and they are down somewhere where they don't want to stay. But I take this moment where I talk. There is another person here with a very long comment. How do you pronounce his name? Doug, no? Breitbart.
Breitbart.
We know each other, but I never know how to pronounce his name. He writing a long comment. I begin with the beginning. Part of the disease of our industrial culture and programming has involved disintegration in humans as beings on an integrated whole basis, converting us into human doings as resources in an industrial frame. And then the contemporary expression for men seemed to map to separation of feeling and heart, and for women, separation from their innate internal voice, power, and entitlement. And the rest, it's too long to read everything, but thank you for the comment. And
it seems to me what he's doing is he's echoing a lot of what we're saying. I mean, one of the things that occurred to me is that having expanded the conversation from a woman and a man's point of view, is expanding the conversation to include the Generation Ys, because we're a bunch of old folk having this conversation. So so how different would it be if we were having that conversation with them? Would they already be seeing certainly a lot of the behavior we're seeing out in the world in terms of how the Generation Y reacts to leadership development and so on, is that there's a completely different sense of engagement, or in many cases non-engagement. They just don't choose to go there and to subscribe to the model that has been in existence for such a long time, and that was it Doug's comment was referring to.
But I would like to refer to a paradox which just comes to my mind. I don't know the English word for Verdinglichung. Can you help me?
Making an objectification.
Yes, objectification, yeah.
Objectification. Well, we have this technical trend of objectification, everything which is human, everything which is nature. And some of these young Generation Y people are very strong exactly in this trend. So to me, it seems pretty paradox. They reclaim to have a different feeling of themselves and of the situation. They reclaim to do something very good for the world, but this trend of transhumanism and objectification, everything which is nature, goes on and goes on. So I don't know what to do with it, but it's very paradox to me.
Yeah, it seems to me it's part of the same. It's part of the same shift, the kind of shift out of Orange. And I think maybe the fact that they're in the middle of it, and that you've got this kind of fulcrum that they're on, which does look quite paradoxical. But then, of course, when you one of the things we know about getting up to the next stage is everything becomes much more paradoxical, and you have to actually deal with the uncertainty instead of trying to put everything in a box where you know exactly where it is. I mean, that's another one of the mindsets that goes with Blue and Orange, is wanting to put everything in its box and define everything as an answer instead of being able to actually move consciously with awareness in a flexible way that reflects the flow of nature and the universe. And even the fact that we talk about nature as if nature is something which exists over there. It's not actually, there's humans and there's nature in a lot of the way that we language this, which is so completely wrong and so stupid but somehow that's what we've done.
Yeah, and we have to stop it. But let's try in the last 10 minutes we have, let's try to somehow pick up what might help or what might lead to a different situation. I put in this listening, appreciating each other. women amongst themselves too, but maybe men among themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I wonder, what are we doing? You know, we know this problem. So what are we doing? And is that something everybody should be doing? I'm projecting, of course, but I know that the last 5 years of my life living with Heidi has been absolutely transforming in terms of what I have learned and what she has learned about me and my history as a man. You know, it is a huge trade that we have made and profited by. So the man-woman kind of thing, I think that is possible to do, but that doesn't mean we have equality of outcome. You know,
Yeah.
she's much more techie than I. Absolutely, I don't want to do any more with that than I have to. So it doesn't mean just because we are equal that
We have to
we
do
the same things at all. Not at
And
all.
I want to add using relationships for growing up together. We had several talks with Tom Habib, who is working on the stages of development as a couple. And this is very, very interesting how he points out in different stages how you behave or how you are, and how you, when you come into first love, because it's first love, I think the fourth stage, that is the first when you can really see the other person as the human being who it is, and instead of what you do normally in relationships, the role or the projection of yourself onto the other person. So doing relationship work would be, for me, at the basis of this coming together between masculine and feminine, and not avoid it. Today, everybody goes away as soon as some problems come out, or live single. How many single people are in the world because they avoid relationships? But for me, relationships are the catapult into
they certainly have that
growth.
for us. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that it's very easy for us to do, and I don't mean this to sound critical, is to kind of think that what I did is what other people have to do. And I mean, I don't disagree with the notion that relationships are a very powerful way in which to work on these things, but I think it's important not to make it the way. I mean, one of the reasons I am interested in working with organizations is because actually changing the paradigm of how organizations themselves operate is a potentially equally liberating space to be in. It's another space in which new ways of looking at things, new ways of getting out of the notion that every problem has to have an answer, rather than being, as I said a minute ago, being in awareness and responding to what's happening, and opening up the whole field of the way that organizations see themselves, having them become more like living systems than they are like things and structures and assemblages of processes. And all there are so many different places. What I would be encouraging people to do is just work where they are and do more of what they can see to do that seems appropriate for them and to match their mindset and their expertise. You know, I'd love loads of people to come to come and read the stuff I write and think the way that I do, but actually that's never going to happen. And I shouldn't live in a space where I think that it should happen.
No,
I think that's very.
It's a possibility, you know. You give examples of where what people can choose to work on. I fully agree with.
Yeah, I think it's very important that relationship is one agenda where you can learn. Organization, of course, is a wonderful, excellent field of learning. Politics is a very good field of learning too. If we want to come to better situation, people have to talk with each other. I'm a very great fan of a little story of Margarete Petersen. I would like to tell it to you because I think she really puts the finger on the right place. She says, when the primordial mother, the mother goddess, gave birth to the humans, she ordered women and men to enter the time. She told women where to go and men how to find the way. The problem arises if women and men lose their capacity to come to an understanding. Then men are walking in cycles with high efficiencies, but they don't know where to, they are not able to arrive. Right. They know how to manage, but they are not able to arrive. And I think this ability to arrive is somehow connected with the question, how can we serve life? Mm-hmm. And women have to come back to their inner wisdom and their knowledge of how to serve life. And women have to bring this into their conversation with men. And men have to listen to that and bring in their way of dealing with this task. So I really think this conversation, how can we serve life, has to take place between the genders and between the different principles.
Can I say something to that? I have the impression that serving life is not very much on a masculine or male agenda.
That's why women have, this is why women have to become aware of their inner wisdom and their inner knowledge and have to put this into the agenda. Women have to speak up to their understanding, to their knowledge. Only then it can, I think the present situation which we have with this dominance of an orange of the orange meme, this is a sort of an outcome of the breakdown of the conversation between men and women and their mutual wisdom.
By the breakdown of the inner conversation inside women, because they gave it up.
And inside men.
Qualities.
And,
inside men.
Yeah.
That happened before.
I mean, I would want to say that men are not, they're not less interested in life. If they stop and kind of connect with that question. There's a Sting song about nuclear war, which says that it won't happen if the Russians love their children too. And there's you know, there is a fundamental biological urge for life. The problem, it seems to me, is that men have been more discouraged from remaining aware of that connection, but it's not that it's less there than it is in women.
Yeah. Sense.
And they have been encouraged to this protection type, which you mentioned in the very beginning, to make war. And it has to be taken back from this war energy and more oriented towards a protection energy, which is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. This was a rich conversation. I thank you both. We are at the top of the hour, and wow, we had some viewers here and probably also in replay. I thank you who were here in live and the others who will see it later. And please connect with us. Write your comments under the YouTube video, also here on the website, and let's continue the conversation. Let's find out what you think about it. And create groups, create communication, because it's all about communication, as Barbara said truly. And she is working for a long time on that. Find that out on the website, thewisdomfactory.net. On their page, there are all the links to both of them, to their books, and enter the conversation.
And for me, it was a pleasure to meet Jon. Not only the two of you, but to meet Jon. I didn't know you, so I'm very delighted. I would love to continue this conversation.
I would welcome that too.
Yeah. It was
good. It was a pleasure to have this conversation in every respect. So thank you. Yeah.
Wait, with nothing to say, but maybe that's fine. It's all right.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And we see you next time.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Don't have to go away.